We're now live in the Lyme Disease UK Facebook group, and today we are welcoming Daisy, who is a health advocate and wellness coach whose mentors include Dr. Klinghardt. Daisy's crucial part in Yolanda Hadid's recovery is mentioned in Yolanda's recent book, Believe Me, My Battle with the Invisible Disability of Lyme Disease. If you want to buy a copy of the book, you can find a link to it on our books resource section of the website. Daisy herself has experienced Lyme disease firsthand, as well as being an advocate for other patients. And she struggled as an undiagnosed patient, attempting to convince doctors that she was actually ill. And then as a diagnosed patient, weaving her way through the maze of healthcare providers on her road to recovery. So thank you so much for joining us today, Daisy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I guess a good place to start would be if you could tell us a little bit about your personal journey with Lyme disease and what got you to where you are now.
So, I battled chronic health issues since I was, quite young, probably, from my teens into my 20s. Back in those days, we all had the alphabet diagnoses. I had EBV, CFS, and I really wasn't savvy about the possibility of Lyme. My health was kind of an ongoing journey of discovery for me most of my life. When I was turned 23, I had been in Africa for Christmas with my mom and somebody who was sort of as a stepfather figure. And I developed pretty bad dysentery, and things seemed to complicate themselves for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was there that I went to a mission hospital, and they handed me a bottle of Schweppes with some clear liquid saying, "Take this for your cough." That I realized I had to become a little bit more efficient about my own health. And so then when I went back to the U.S., when I was in college, I really couldn't get well everywhere I went. And so then I kind of became more disciplined about trying to solve my own health issues. When I was in my late 30s, I met a dentist who told me that the only way I would get well is if I took all the metal out of my mouth, because I had a mouthful of metal having grown up in Europe. Wasn't a lot of care to dental hygiene, and so I was filled with a mouthful of mercury. And unfortunately, this dentist removed all of my mercury fillings, but he went way too deep, and he damaged most of the molars in my mouth. So then I was left with a complication of having an ongoing chronic infection in my jawbone. When I met Dr. Klinghardt thereafter, because a doctor friend of mine said if I had the dental issues you're having, I would go straight to see Dr. Klinghardt. It would not pass go. So I went to see him, and I had another agenda in seeing him, which was to deal with, question him and have his help around a battle that I was having with infertility, which I know he'd had a lot of success around because he'd written some articles about how he helped women with infertility issues. And so when I met him, he said, "You have Lyme disease." And I thought he was crazy. I said, "I've come here for my teeth."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I began to understand the bigger picture of my health overall in life. And I just became like a sponge, and he and I developed this relationship where we, continued to, I grew from him and learned from him, and obviously helped myself, and then started to help other people. I was already a life coach because of many of the things I had overcome in my own life, and I was helping many people overcome emotional issues in their life. So this was a parallel conversation for me where I started to help others with their physical health, and it just blossomed from there in relationship to really understanding my own health picture and how to solve its problems. And then obviously the rest is history, helping Yolanda and many people thereafter, and sometimes with Dr. Klinghardt or other doctors, and continuing to battle and understand my own health, and by doing that, helping other people. And then consequently, certifying through Klinghardt Academy and learning the methodology of testing that Dr. Klinghardt uses to help patients efficient even further.
Wow, quite a journey.
Yeah.
And a similar or familiar start, I guess, to probably myself and others in this group, where it was, you just didn't suspect Lyme disease. It was other health issues and an infection that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. I guess, is there a certain approach or particular treatment that you feel was a breakthrough in your recovery?
For me, that's a very complicated question because there are so many things that helped and then created the overall recovery as a whole. Mm-hmm. So I always wrestle with the question of what's the one thing that transforms something. I personally do and have done really well with ozone. High dose ozone was really impactful for me, particularly a treatment called RHP or EBU, or sometimes called recirculatory hemoperfusion, which is sort of like an ozone dialysis where a third of your blood volume can be, it's kind of a combination apheresis, ozone treatment, dialysis. So that was really impactful for me. Mm-hmm. Obviously, cavitation surgery in the right hands. Unfortunately, I have to say that because there are many people who are good at cavitation surgery and it's not. I am lucky enough to have worked with an amazing dentist by the name of Dr. Volz, who's in Switzerland. And he, replaced all of my root canals with zirconium implants. And that was not an easy thing to do because I had 14 root canals as a result of all the issues that I had, but that was really necessary for me. And I have had a lot of improvements since then. And I'm not saying that that's something everybody needs to do, but I fought it for a very long time. I have to say, I did not want to take my teeth out. And then there are many other things that have been amazing. LDI, autologous LDI, basically autonosodes. Obviously, homeopathics of all kind have been very impactful for me. The list is endless. Immune modulators like Rerum or DCMAF. The list is endless about things that I value and think really helped me and help other people.
Wonderful. And had you completely recovered when you started doing your advocacy work, or were you working as a life coach and that?
And I was not completely recovered, but I have a very ambivalent relationship with this completely recovered conversation or remission or cured. I really don't like using that terminology because for me it's borrowed term from the cancer conversation.
Yes.
I don't necessarily think that patients with chronic infections or chronic health issues will ever shift their perspective about being completely dedicated to observing their body and the world in relationship to their health. And I think that the journey forever changes us, and we go through periods where we're less vigilant and periods where we're more vigilant. And I'm certainly hyper-functional. I manage anywhere from 30 to 35 cases, or families actually, where there are multiple cases within a family. I have a 3-year-old, and I travel all over the country, all over the world. So yes, I think you would say that I'm fairly recovered, but I think it's something that still needs to be managed. And that do we cure Lyme? Do we even cure cancer? I think we get above the bugs, and the bugs are always available to come back and catch us if we're not taking good care of ourselves.
I think you're absolutely put the nail on the head when you said that it's we're forever changed by this journey. I think it would be impossible to go through this and not be changed, but to come out, to see people like yourself that have come out the other end and are now functional again, and what's normal, but in comparison to somebody who doesn't have chronic health issues and at that level of activity, I think there's people without chronic health issues that would think that was a lot.
Yes, exactly. I understand. I do, and I understand that, and I think what we can accomplish for those of us who've been through this and who manage this is a measure of how much better we are. But I do think, I mean, I have symptoms still. You know, I'm not symptom free, and I manage them, and I take courageous steps in relationship to how far I've come. You know, with my own health, I become bolder to be completely transparent and candid. This holiday season, I attempted, a donor embryo transfer to actually carry myself. Dr. Klinghardt and I have been working on that being a health victory for me on the other side of things. And I'm not sure if I've achieved it or accomplished it, but it's part of my health goal and journey. And I just turned 52. So, but for me, there are certain aspects of my immune system or my immune issues that I'm still working on. And I will continue to do so and try to solve pieces of the puzzle for myself and also for other people who need me to do that for them, so that if I can figure it out for myself, I can figure it out for them.
Well, thank you so much for being so candid, and absolutely all the best with that. We're very much wishing you well. I guess you've touched on your clients, and obviously all your cases vary. But what are some of the areas that people come to you needing most help with?
I mean, obviously Lyme disease, Lyme and co-infections, and that is a category, but it's also a subcategory because Lyme and co-infections often manifest itself in different ways. For example, and it is mentioned in the book, but I do have a patient with ALS. I don't like to call them patients because I'm not licensed, but every now and then I'll say that. But I do have clients. I have a client who has ALS. I have clients who have, cognitive disabilities that may be diagnosed with various titles, neurological titles that are Lyme-based. I've worked on many PANDAS cases. I have a very large population of young patients that I'm working with, and it's really heartbreaking because they're socialized and they come into their lives with this backdrop. So it's often difficult for them to understand who they have to be or how to be in the world. And they often have the chronic strep PANDAS complication as well as Lyme disease. I've worked with some cancer patients as well. There are a lot of crossovers and similarities with cancer and chronic infection, and some people will say that they're the same.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with the children. It's I think it's difficult enough for an adult, but for a child to have no reference point of what wellness feels like is very difficult.
I agree.
So I guess some of your patients must come to you without knowing they have Lyme disease, especially if it's a case, if it's an underlying part of another condition. What, in your opinion, is the best way to determine whether somebody has Lyme disease and co-infections, given the testing around them is so unreliable at present?
Right. So this is a question about testing and
diagnosis.
I don't know what is available in the UK, although I know that some people have used this particular test overseas because I've facilitated people doing that, and I know that Dr. Voles uses it for cavitation sometimes. But DNA Connections is a lab, and they'll hate me for talking about them because they don't have any time and they have too much work. But DNA Connections is a laboratory in Colorado which does a urine PCR, and Dr. Klinghardt that's his preferred test. I really find that it is more accurate and more effective because it's literally DNA, so bugs, live bugs. It's not an antibody test. And many people who have been sick with chronic Lyme for many, many years are not going to show antibodies, so it's moot. So this PCR test is wonderful. It shows, Borrelia, different types, different forms of Borrelia. Borrelia miyamotoi is in there, Anaplasma, Rickettsia, Babesia, Bartonella, and it's very user-friendly for patients. They can, get a urine cup. And now Dr. Klinghardt, and all of us who work with or under or in conjunction with Dr. Klinghardt recommend that it's provocated. So either a deep tissue massage or an ultrasound around sort of the lymph areas. It's there is an article published called the RK protocol that helps practitioners and patients understand how to use ultrasound in relationship to doing the DNA connections test. And I think it's a really useful test, and it's spelled DNA connections with an X. And then the other thing, obviously, that I rely upon, and many people rely upon, particularly who are ART certified, is the muscle testing, and I like to cross-reference the muscle testing with the DNA connections.
I mean, it's probably a good point to ask you about ART and muscle testing. For those that don't know about it, what is it? And is it something people can do themselves, or do they need to go to a practitioner? A bit more about that would be great to know.
Yes, so let me just start by explaining applied kinesiology, or straight what some people call AK, or talking about what an AK practitioner could do. And that is sort of the energetic principle that the body holds, all the information it needs to communicate, whether the patient or the person knows it or not. So if I hold my arm out and, I tell you to say, let's say somebody asks me to say, my name is Daisy, and I say, my name is Daisy, my arm will be strong because it's true. But if I say my name is Sarah and that's not true, my arm will go weak because the body doesn't resonate. So there's no resonance with that truth. Mm-hmm. So when we're dealing with the body as a whole, in terms of looking at what might be causing different issues, that body holds all the information that it needs to communicate in order for people to help a body. And a good AK practitioner that does straight muscle testing can garner that kind of information from someone's body. ART, which was devised and invented by Dr. Klinghardt, takes it to a much deeper, more profound level, and it uses a glass cube as well as what's called a pull filter, where it asks the body to refract light, and or it asks the body where light is not being seen. And by using some of the same tools that we might use in applied kinesiology, direct resonance with different pathogens or illnesses or organ systems or toxicities, we can gather information about what the body is saying to us about what it needs. And we can also gather information about what the body needs to be treated with. And that could be anything from homeopathic to an herb to ozone to anything. And the reason why I particularly love having this system as a tool to help my clients is that most people with chronic illnesses don't have a compass. And they're being told that they have to do all these things and use all these methodologies and treatments and things to do, but they have no idea if they're headed forward or backward or sideways, because a herx and a symptom looks exactly the same, and there's no indication that they're headed in a way that's helpful. So obviously, when I work with patients, I bring them to practitioners, typically that have the ability to use ART, but then I'm a good sort of on-the-ground soldier. I'm sort of the protocol police, and I can do, bi-weekly checks, or I can check in as well as do other things, manage care, get them to the right doctors, see where things need more attention, bring in a new doctor that handles a particular problem. It's every case is like a Rubik's Cube, and my job is to kind of unlock the puzzle, which is why I like to handle cases that are, complex and long-term, because I've had some success in helping people unlock that puzzle. And some of it is, every day sort of looking at the muscle testing and looking at what's going on and what's still working and not working, when obviously patients can't get to a doctor as frequently. And some of it is unlocking the code and finding the right path forward, and all of the above are true.
Thank you. I've personally certainly found energy testing and ART to be a big part of my journey, and I think the reason you said is spot on for me, is that it helps guide my treatment path. And there's so many things out there, and I'm also a big believer of going with intuition, but there's so many things out there and we don't yet know what the best route is and how to decide from a scientific perspective, if you like. So it's very useful to have that help when we're all so different.
Yeah, and I always, I'm encouraged that Lyme patients or chronic infection patients support each other and have a community, but I'm also sometimes overwhelmed for patients because they get information about the different things that work well for different people, and it's not a foregone conclusion that if something worked well for another patient, it's going to work well for that other, for their friend. I like to say that, Lyme disease is like taking a bunch of confetti on a day with a very high wind and dropping it over a babbling brook, and seeing where it lands is each person's individual Lyme picture, because it's such a complex picture. And I like what Dr. Klinghardt says, that in many ways it's really AIDS minor. And so we have to be willing to look at how to unfold, the priority of infections and co-infections and toxicity to get that person into a better place. So I think when a doctor's saying, well, you need to do the IVIG, this is the way, or a friend is saying, well, I did, ozone and I'm cured, or I went to this doctor who made me drink milk for 3 weeks and I'm cured, it's complicated. And I like to ask that person's body if that's going to work for that person's body.
No, I agreed. And you mentioned Dr. Klinghardt a few times and your training with him. For people that don't know much about his approach, are you able to tell us a little bit more about his approach and how that may differ to other Lyme doctors?
I can't say enough good things about Dr. Klinghardt. It makes me emotional because he's a person I just adore.
Yeah.
Dr. Klinghardt has a very loving spirit, and he himself has gone through his own journey towards health. And so I really like to work with doctors who have had their own battle with illness, because they have a different understanding of it in their own body when they're speaking to their patients. And what's amazing about Dr. Klinghardt, and I answer this in part of his approach, is that he really listens with his whole experience and guides people from his experience. And he really respects that the body has the ability to find its way. Now, I know he sometimes gets criticized for being heavy-handed because he has sometimes that can be aggressive with treatment, but he's also the person that you go to when you're stuck and you don't know how to get to the next place, because he's really amazing in terms of muscle testing. He can find things, that other people may not have been brave enough to look for. And he's also an amazing seeker, and he never gives up, in looking for another answer that hasn't, so many doctors have grooves that they find where they rest upon that groove because, we're doing this, they're doing this. But Dr. Klinghardt is, always looking for something better for people. And, I don't want to paraphrase him or quote him, but I think he believes that medicine can be better, and he wants to be a part of that solution. That anybody working in the medical arena or in the health field can do better and become better themselves to help other people. And it's a rare find to find somebody, doing that.
Agreed. It's so common, from the doctors I've seen anyway. Or rather uncommon, I suppose, to hear someone that says, I don't know, or we could do better, and I want to keep seeking. So I absolutely agree with that.
I don't know if I really answered your question. Part of it is because I got emotional.
No, it's perfect. It's just good. it's really good to hear more about him. I mean, it's great. Thank you. Going on sort of back to sort of more detail around Lyme itself, do you believe that Lyme can lie dormant for many years and before manifesting itself? It sounded like that might be the case for yourself.
Yes.
That's a very simple one. But no, from your story, I thought it sounded...
The answer for you, but the answer is yes.
Yeah, for myself as well. It was about 17 years for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, that's the difficulty becomes in managing the popular opinion and the medical opinion that that's just simply not true and that we're all crazy. And I don't agree with that at all. I work with people. I'm on the front lines of the Lyme world, in people's lives, in people's families. I see the devastation. So if those people would like to come onto the battlefield with me, I can show them a different reality.
No, it's like you said, the people that have actually walked the talk and lived that health journey, it's very different approach.
Exactly.
And I guess linking to that really is the discussion around stress, and how much do you think that stress has an impact perhaps on being that tipping point between a perhaps dormant infection and also then recovery or whatever we want to call it, the wellness journey?
You know, I mean, I think that stress is an underlying trigger for every illness that exists in the world, not just Lyme disease. And I know that, unfortunately, us Lymies get pigeonholed and labeled, you know, as the crazier of the illnesses. But yes, I mean, you know, I think really good practitioners ask the question, you know, what was going on with you emotionally at the time that you started to feel unwell? Did anything happen? You know, did your house burn down? Did you have a divorce? You know, were you in an abusive, you know, marriage? You know, any number of, I'm making stuff up now, but, you know, I think it's important to always look at any kind of trauma, you know, I mean, I lost my sister a year and a half ago, and, you know, it had an impact on me, my health. So, yeah, and I think those of us with chronic illness, we have to really manage events in our lives, you know, work, losses, everything.
What would you advise your clients in terms of dealing with underlying trauma?
Well, you know, I mean, I in the same line of working with Dr. Klinghardt, have been, you know, well trained. Dr. Klinghardt, one of the courses that he offers is APN, Applied Neuropsychobiology. I might be misquoting that, but anyway, so Dr. Klinghardt works a lot with muscle testing and, you know, shifting, or AK, with shifting people's emotional trauma. And some of it is looking at, you know, if something is ours or it was given to us by someone in our surrounding or family. Is it, you know, is this my guilt, someone else's guilt? Is this my shame, someone else's shame? So there are ways to work with that in the muscle testing. Also, I mean, and I think this is a really powerful and important tool that Dr. Klinghardt uses, and this is constellation work, looking at the sort of genealogy of your family and how past trauma, let's just even say that, you know, somebody's I'm just going to use an example, like someone is first generation American, but, you know, their families were in concentration camps. You know, that has an impact on that person's health and how they unfold in the world. And so doing constellation work, I'm not going to explain it well, not that I don't have experience in working with people's emotional life, but constellation work is very complicated, and there are many books about it, and Dr. Klinghardt is really amazing at it and teaches it and leads constellations, and many of Dr. Klinghart's disciples do constellation work, a couple people in Seattle that I think are wonderful. And that is sort of working within a group or even one-on-one where you get to sort of enact certain aspects of your family system, your family tree, your heritage, your lineage, and to see how it's impacting your current state of health. And sometimes just presencing those realities can completely shift something around someone's health.
Thank you. That's really great for you to share that. And during that journey, yourselves and also your clients, do you have any recommendations of coping mechanisms to deal with the dark days?
That's a mouthful of noodles. There's so many answers to that question. And it's so unique. I don't know that I would be able to answer that specifically, or generally, actually. I know that being an advocate in someone's life, and, this, I think this speaks to another one of your questions, but, oftentimes I'll be in someone's direct vicinity, and as a tool, anywhere from 6 months to a couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes more depending on what's going on with people. But, my role is to garner hope and vision for someone's transformation when they can't see it. And that sometimes requires of me to employ various tools. Sometimes it's, developing a routine around walking.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's, finding a good therapist. Sometimes it's finding a good constitutional homeopathic remedy. Sometimes it's revamping someone's entire medical team. Sometimes it's going with someone that's a patient has found for themselves that they have faith in when it's absolutely not the right thing. But letting them go through that and being there and supporting them in spite of the fact that, like a good parent, I know that won't be the right path for them. And being there on the other side without the "I told you so," but just lovingly say, "Yeah, we can do something else now." So, I could speak on this topic for hours. In multiple, in cases where there's a lot of psycho-emotional, neuropsych issues, because PANDAS brings that forth in many families. It's sometimes going down the rabbit hole with a family, for 5 to 6 hours when somebody's in an incident, and just holding space and letting people know that this is okay. It's endless. So,
of course, and I also think people listening, to yourself and others that are now back to a functioning life is really inspirational. It does show that it's possible.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Also being a stand for the other side.
Yeah. So powerful.
And myself, and also with those that I have helped to get to what somebody determines is the other side for them. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very subjective truth. Mm-hmm. Someone says, "I'm in remission," or whatever terminology they want to use. I like to say, when I can help people go to higher ground, whatever that is for them.
Yep.
Because some people could be on higher ground and have no clue that they are, so it's really about point of view. But anyway, being a stand for the fact that I'm at higher ground and that there are people that are at higher ground is also an important tool. And I think that healing happens in the presence of other people. And to be a witness to someone's pain and difficulty, especially for patients with chronic illness, is a huge piece of the puzzle, because most chronically ill people don't feel seen. And my own journey in life, partially because of my own emotional history and what I had to overcome to be who I am today, unfortunately, I had to overcome feeling invisible just because of some of the things, objectification that I had early on in life. And so I think that people working with patients or people who have chronic infection or chronic illnesses really need to work on seeing people for who they are and being there for people in the moment that they're in, whatever that is. So, for example, if I come onto a case and they're convinced that they have to do this treatment and that's what they want and they want to be, accompanied through that treatment. And I know that that's possibly going to be, a shaggy dog story for them or whatever. I will accompany people where they are until it's time to, take them somewhere else.
I think that's really great advice for some of the carers and parents that we have in the group. It's so easy to want to fix and do it your way, but that belief in the patient being seen is so important.
You can't heal if you don't trust the infrastructure. So if the person who's trying to heal feels manipulated and pushed and shoved and, guided because of someone else's agenda, there's no healing to be had.
No, I can see that. Some of our members, maybe they haven't started their treatment yet, or maybe they can't afford to see some of the doctors that we've talked about. Are there any sort of simple dietary and lifestyle changes that you could recommend for people to start at home, taking those sort of first steps, whether they're detox or lifestyle or diet or...
Right. So, these are general questions with general answers. And yes, I think there are some, basic guidelines that we can offer. Certainly, we can all benefit from cutting out sugar and carbohydrates. And I think, everyone's health will improve whether you are sick or not from cutting out sugar and carbohydrates. And I think that's a given. I don't know many people who thrive under that kind of, diet. And I do know that chronic infections love sugar because it feeds them. One of the things that is always addressed when we're muscle testing ART is how are things being excreted from the body? What are binders that people are taking? And, we have a number of ones that we check. Not everybody tests for the same binders, but certainly chlorella or clay or charcoal or, any kind of, some people like to use pectosol, some people like to use silica. So binders are an important tool, especially if you're using any kind of killing agents or you're addressing an infection. It's easy to get backed up and have debris, sort of dead bugs in your system and feel worse. And then, Dr. Klinghardt has really worked at getting together a formula that manages a lot of the co-infections and chronic infections. And it's, you can order it. It's not that expensive. It's called the Cocktail, and it's made by BioPure. And I think there's also one made by Key Science, actually, for those in the UK. It's KI Science, and I think it might have a different name. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I don't know that for you.
Key Science is available in the UK. We can get that
easily. Yes. And so it's, I'll have to remember the name because it's called differently. It's not called the Cocktail in the UK. It's got a different name. But anyway, it's the basic antimicrobial that Dr. Klinghardt uses. And, if you can't afford to see, a Lyme literate doctor, or you can't go outside of the parameters and find, the right treatment, if you take the Cocktail, if you just take, depending on how sensitive you are, 1 to 4 dropperfuls a day, you can push back a lot of infections.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for severe insomnia?
That's a tough one. It's a tough one because it's a different answer for, again, different people. And a lot of times, severe insomnia is driven by, toxicity in the limbic system or in the brain. And Dr. Klinghardt likes to detox the brain with high-dose melatonin, sometimes in conjunction with DMSA or DMPS. But I think that's tricky to do on your own. Needs guidance. But even taking high-dose melatonin can be really helpful to kind of reset the circadian rhythm. And, melatonin at high doses, there's a product called oncatonin, which I think is 10 milligrams of melatonin, or you can just, administer a higher dose for yourself and whatever melatonin you like. And at first it can be a little bit difficult because you can be overtired, but melatonin is an amazing antioxidant. It's one of the best antioxidants we have. And it's a really useful brain detox. Obviously, there are many, many other tools that are trial and error with some clients who have severe insomnia, from lavender oil caplets to, different homeopathics, Ignatia or Coffea cruda. There are so many things that we can try. And it's not the same. Not everybody, responds to the same thing. Once again, it's my caveat for every conversation.
No, of course, it's completely understandable. I guess a similar question around brain fog. What do you find the biggest causes of brain fog are, and some of the most effective treatments?
Yes. So once again, we're talking about some sort of toxicity, in the limbic system, and also, different issues there. Definitely tonsil focus with, either strep or any other kind of infection can cause tremendous amounts of brain fog, can cause any kind of cognitive issue or disability. Dental issues, cavitation issues can cause enormous amounts of brain fog. I cannot stress enough, and this is because of my own journey, the importance of looking at the oral cavity for, driving chronic ill health. Mm-hmm. And it's completely, I think I must have posted, if you go to my Instagram, I posted recently, an article about, my experience in relationship to helping people with dental health. And, so many people are duped by dentists that, their crowns are porcelain, they're not metal-based. So many people have metal-based crowns in their mouth. I've just recently, and this is what I wrote about on my Instagram, when I was in Europe in November, but so many people are duped. They can have up to 10 crowns in their mouth that are all metal-based, and they're told, no, they're porcelain. So many Lyme patients have cavitations where they had wisdom teeth extractions, and they have chronic brain fog, chronic cognitive issues. So anything that's, any kind of focus of infection sort of from the neck up can really affect the brain and cause people to have all of the issues that people are suffering with in relationship to their brain.
How about headaches and neck pain?
Yeah, the Lyme bugs love to live in the cervical spine. Artesunate is really an amazing tool. I've seen a lot of people use artesunate with segmental therapy in the cervical spine and the overall spine, which can help with headaches as well as neck aches. Sometimes those are coming from the lymph. The lymph channel is, toxic from metal. It's toxic from dental infections. It's toxic from tonsil infections. Sinus is a huge cause of chronic headaches. Marcons, which is a type of staph, can live in the sinus cavity. Fungus can live in the sinus cavity. Some people can have a structural issue that doesn't allow their sinuses to clear properly. These are things that we have to be really willing to explore and be detectives about for ourselves and for other people.
Thank you. One of our members also asked about what you'd recommend for premenstrual water retention. I don't know if you'd have any thoughts on that.
I very much like a product line by the name of Standard Process, not necessarily, to infections, but for organ support in particular, and for different, functions of the body. And there's a great product called AC Carbamide by Standard Process, which is amazing. It's a natural diuretic. And it's an amazing tool for, occasional water retention. It happens to also help with night terrors and nightmares.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's obviously in Yolanda's book, but and other people have had the treatment. But what are your thoughts on stem cells, and also the timing of them? Should they be done closer to recovery for success, and where should the stem cells be derived from?
I'm by no means a stem cell expert, so I just want to say that. Mm-hmm. But I have a lot of experience with clients working with stem cells and using different types of stem cells. What I do know is that stem cells address whatever issue the body needs to address at the moment. So if the body is managing a chronic infection or is healing from a surgery, the stem cells will go to that place to heal that particular issue. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes people do stem cells too soon because, we all want to be better yesterday. We have no patience for this journey.
Of course.
We're done. And so I think it's important to have the right timing in relationship to stem cells and to give it, to make sure we've addressed some of, the more virulent infections that we might be managing. I've heard Dr. Klinghardt say this, and other people say that sometimes using stem cells too soon can actually give the infections more steam. Mm-hmm. I've also heard people who work in stem cells say that that's hogwash. So I can't say that I know the answer to that, but I know that it's kind of both sides of the aisle that speak that way. Mm-hmm. I have seen more benefit with clients from adipose stem cell than, blood-derived stem cells. I've also seen people do well with, and this is a very controversial conversation, embryonic or umbilical cord, but I know that that's got ethics issues, and also I know that it's flirting with some level of danger. Mm-hmm. Because I think that those cells are so young that they sometimes, can be rogue and do things that we don't want them to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, that makes sense. Thank you. How often do you see mold toxicity being an issue for your clients?
Never.
You don't know, it's not a big part of your experience.
Neurotoxicity being a part of the conversation? I'm sorry?
Mold.
Oh, mold. I didn't understand.
Sorry, my accent.
How often do you see no toxicity being part of it? And I was like, no, never. Toxicity is always a part of it. Yes, mold is a frequent. I look at pathogens as 4 different categories, right? So there's main categories. There's virus, bacterial, fungal, and parasitic. And I'm often working at juggling different issues in different categories. So mold is very much, up there. One of the things that's complicated about mold is I think that, there's been a couple of practitioners who were very, very mold heavy and, made mold the whole conversation. Mm-hmm. And I don't think mold is the whole conversation. I think we have to look at all of the pathogens and figure out the Rubik's Cube of all those pathogens.
Yeah, no, that's understandable.
But certainly you're in a mold-infected environment. In other words, if you have mold in your home, or if you go to a school where there's mold and you're being chronically exposed to mold, it's very important to remediate that or get out of that environment.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This is quite a specific question from a member, and they ask, what do you think of LDI or LDA for food intolerances and tick-borne infections? I have neuropathy on eating lectins. The immune system and mast cells were triggered after trying the herbal formula A-Bart whilst having a very leaky gut. I'm now an inflammatory mess with what feels like an autoimmune situation.
Right. Is that one question or two questions? The first part of it is, what do I think of LDI and LDA?
Yeah, I think the second part was more information about the case, really. So, issues
so the first
eating.
part of the question is that I think that LDI and LDA is an amazing tool. And I think it's really, really useful for chronic illness. There are different ways that people are using it. Some people just listen and take a case and say, oh, well, you sound like, a fungal case, and I'm going to give you, yeast. And some people will say, well, you're a classic Borrelia, Lyme co-infections. I'm going to give you the Lyme mix. I don't love working that way. I have worked that way with some practitioners. The way Dr. Klinghardt uses LDI, LDA, and other practitioners that work like Dr. Klinghardt is that we muscle test people and use the antigen in relationship to what we see, and also the potency. Because sometimes the potency can be way too strong for people, and you can have a very bad flare on LDA and LDI. And there are some tools, obviously there's prednisone that people have used to mitigate some of the LDA, LDI responses, but also high dose vitamin D can help as well. So yes, one has to manage flares on LDA, LDI. The second part of the question is, there was given, can you repeat that?
Yeah, given the herbal formula A-Bart whilst having a very leaky gut, now feels like an inflammatory mess with what feels like an autoimmune situation.
It's difficult to answer without getting more specific into that case. However, sometimes a homeopathic can trigger what's really going on, and Bartonella is complicated because Bartonella does impact the gut enormously, more so than we all know. And so it could be a healing crisis, and that is possible to find one's way out of a healing crisis. I don't know it for that person at the moment because it's obviously, I don't have the familiarity with the whole case. But there might be a piece of the puzzle there that someone's not looking at. One of the things that I do is, if there's an area where we're stuck, is I'll go back and look at the labs again, or I'll look at the, like a detective. And so whoever is working with that person, their team, that person would benefit from, taking a deeper look, either with muscle testing or with looking at the labs, or, reassessing and reevaluating. But just to give that person hope, I just want them to know that I've been in many situations where something has triggered and flared someone, and they've gotten out of it.
No, I think that's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, it's doable. It's doable. You're not stuck there.
Yeah.
It feels like we're stuck. Sometimes it feels like we're stuck in a bad place and there's no way out, but you can get out of it.
No, that's really important. Thank you. A lot of our members have read Yolanda's book, so I was just wondering if you might be able to touch on her journey a little bit, as I know you've been involved with that. So from her book and following her journey, I'm aware she's tried many different treatments, and you've travelled around the world with her and helped her search for what's next on her treatment path. And it sounds like her determination is brought improvements. And I guess it would be nice to know just a little bit about that journey and how she's doing now.
Right. So, Yolanda is beautifully unique in her, not unlike Dr. Klinghardt and not unlike myself. Yolanda is a stand for health and a seeker for herself and for many in relationship to finding the best tools to solve, a very difficult problem. And she will never stop being a seeker. It's just who she is.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was wonderful about working with Yolanda is that she's always an invitation for better. And sometimes clients are not, they just they want help, but there are different things that are intervening or interfering with their willingness to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And some it's their point of view about what is requires of them to do that, whether it's discipline or a mindset change, or Yolanda is never an obstacle to any of that. And she has enormous discipline. She and I share being Capricorns. And so we have that, we're going to do this by sheer determination. So, and that's, I think, in many ways, that's, if someone were to ask me what's the one thing that helped Yolanda get better, I would say her determination and discipline, because she's relentless. And yes, I mean, her journey was diverse, and there were many parts of it in it. I mean, I'm not really saying anything new. It's in the book, and just want to emphasize that if you have a hard time reading because of your cognitive issues, there is a book on tape which I read. Yolanda reads the intro, and I read the rest of the book, so you can listen to it. I was not there for the first part of that journey, but I was definitely there sort of midway through the book on. And I'm still helping Yolanda and her family with their health. It's something I'm dedicated to for the rest of my life. And that happens to be true for many of my clients. I dedicate to their families. It's hard to begin that process. It's an intimate journey, and then still do that. So Yolanda is doing much better, certainly, than she was when I first met her. And once again, in relationship to the conversation we had earlier about how much one can do and accomplish, when they're in higher ground, Yolanda's accomplishing and doing a lot more than she was able to do prior. And she's really happy, she's really thriving. And as her friend and advocate, it makes me very happy.
Oh, I can imagine. So rewarding.
I'm like a proud mom.
I can absolutely. I know, I can imagine. Absolutely imagine. It's a wonderful thing. If someone was interested in becoming an advocate, what would you advise them to do?
That's a really tough question. Become extremely resilient. Unto yourself first.
Yeah.
Being in the role of advocate, sometimes, one has to have an unbreakable soul for multiple reasons. I think I think one has to have a calling to this. I don't think it's something that you can strategize around.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like in each person's individual path. But for me, certainly my life, when I add up all of the different events, adds up to healing with a capital H. I have toyed with the possibility or the idea of actually starting an advocacy training program for people. And I'm not really sure what that looks like yet, but certainly people ask me all the time if there are advocates in their area. I definitely, have worked with people all over the world, Guatemala, everywhere, Europe. So for me, geography is never an issue. But, I think some people have been through this journey and want to become advocates and don't know how to begin. And, some people are going through this journey and want somebody, on a day-to-day basis, like in their home. So there's room for developing this profession. There's, there are not a lot of, advocates that are trained. My role wears many, many hats. I mean, I know there are many people out there saying I'm a health coach or I'm a health, something, helping people with their health. But the role that I have is definitely specific to each family. But sometimes, I'm a counselor. Sometimes I'm an assistant. Sometimes, I'm a bulldog. Sometimes I'm a kind angel helping hand. I mean, I have to wear many, many hats. And I think it requires really being open to having anything come your way. And there's nothing in my role that I'm not willing to do. I've taken people food shopping because they can't think straight.
Yeah.
I've driven people because they can't drive. So I think dedicating to someone's case brings in many, many different tasks. And I think the role of an advocate that really can help people get to higher ground is very diverse. And some people have pride around that. Like, I won't do that, and sometimes it's, being in a hotel room with someone when they're bleeding all over their sheets, and you have to manage that situation. I mean, there's just so many things that come up.
Yeah, I can't begin to imagine what you've experienced.
Oh, you cannot.
I think if one of our members wanted to become one of your clients, how would they go about that?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me. I'm very approachable, and I mostly work. I don't really do one like hour per hour consults with people because I just haven't had the time to do kind of like consults on a person's case for an hour, and an hour is never enough time.
No.
Just too much. So I typically work with increments of hours. People can, some people, it's usually a minimum of 10, and it could be a maximum of, whatever you want. And the hourly fee is incrementally less depending on how many hours you pre-purchase. And I work with a contract. There are just there's some rules and sort of guidelines to follow, but I'm very approachable. You can contact me through my website, or you can, on my personal email is dipsydaisy@aol.com. I respond to everyone. I try not to give just kind of random medical advice because that's dangerous. But if I will consider everyone's case that comes across, my desk and see if there's anything I can do. And I'm working more and more in Europe because I go to Switzerland now 3 to 5 times a year. So I have worked with some people overseas, and I'm actually from Europe. I was born and raised in France, so I love going to Europe. So yes, I'm available, and you can reach out to me and ask me if you want me to help you with your case, if I'll consider your case.
Thank you. We'll share your website when we post this recording on the website so people can know where to find you. I guess the final question that we always ask everybody is, what would you say to somebody who feels there's no way out?
Yeah, I really want to answer that authentically and not just give, a knee-jerk answer. Give it more time. And dare to hope. Grieve. All the losses, including the loss of time. And, stand up again and ask for help. And someone will hear you, and someone will help you carve a path. Even when you can't see it, someone might be able to see it for you. And let that person help you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear about your journey and how you approach some of your cases. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
No, I just really want to, express my gratitude for the work that you do, and for the community that you've created, and that you all, as community members, support each other in. And I want to thank you for inviting me to speak today. I've really enjoyed it. And, I guess I just want to say one thing. Remember to always be on each other's side. It's easy when we're really frustrated not to be on each other's side. And we're all at fault with that, because it feels like there's, we're fighting such a big battle, but let's fight it all together.
Thank you.
It's really important. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.